everyone, it's Kylie from PaperDaisyJournals. This is a flip through of a keepsake journal I have made, and I have called her Marguerite. Marguerite is French for daisy, and there is a definite daisy theme throughout this journal. It is fabric covered. It's quite soft because I've only used light cardstock to give it a little bit of structure, but she is a large journal with 80 pages. And I was also inspired by the daisy theme and colours because I have used my Boudoir Printable kit throughout this journal. So the closure is a sari silk, and I have added a beautiful blue crystal heart. It's a vintage crystal heart and a daisy charm to the closure. So that is a beautiful feature on the cover. You can, however, take this off and use this in the journal. I have just knotted and bowed it to the top there, but it should be easy to remove. On the cover here, I have used a beautiful silk, and this is Marguerite. She likes to have her image on her journal. I have used a silk. It came in a timber frame, but I have obviously taken that off and replaced it with the edge of a doily that I've hand stitched on. And I've used this one because I felt that they looked like daisies. So Marguerite has a new frame, and this is layered on top of another handmade doily as well. So there's a couple of layers, and there's also some tea stained fabric underneath. So that is the front cover. This is a vintage silk, so it's quite delicate, but it has a beautiful touch. On the spine here, it has 3 signatures, and I have used some antique beads and some vintage glass buttons in those beautiful sort of blues. There's also some slow stitched lace to add another beautiful feature. On the back here, I've fussy cut some blossoms from some vintage fabric and hand stitched those on, and done a little bit of hand stitching on the blossoms as well. And this is a little patch that I thought it sort of looks like a daisy. So I do have quite a few of these I've cut from an old tablecloth. So I'll be sort of incorporating one of these on each of my journals until I run out. But I have a lot. And I don't make that many journals, so hopefully I never run out. But that's sort of the Paper Daisy journal kind of patch, I guess. Just very subtle there. So inside the journal, it's A5 size, so it's quite a large journal. I have used a beautiful piece of lace that I tea stained. So I've tea stained or coffee stained all of the fabrics and trims to sort of tie in with the Boudoir Printable kit. And that is sort of the color theme. You can see here I've hand stitched the cover with some really beautiful vintage gold thread. And I've made all of the ephemera. I think there's 14 pieces. A lot of them are these big journaling cards. I think there's at least 4. And on here I've used some French letter, a piece of book page. Any artists that have Etsy shops or Instagram accounts, I'll do my best to leave in the description. And some Locta paper there, and French receipt, and of course a beautiful ruffle at the top. So that just sits beautifully in that pocket there. There's quite a lot of journaling space in this journal. I've tried to keep most of the pages full length because my last journal was heavily decorated, and I do feel it's nice to have a balance between writing space and decoration. I have I've done a lot of hand stitching in this journal as well. So I've hand stitched some of this trim as a pocket, and inside I have a just lightly collaged wallpaper tag and the perfect blues, a bit of stamping, and this is Locta paper as well. It just has a beautiful texture. It's handmade paper. This is a page from the Boudoir Printable Kit, and I will link that in the description as well. And this is the theme here, is the blue daisy. I have also used tea stain paper. This is some Chantilly lace here, a wallpaper pocket, and I have hand stitched some of that really gorgeous Swiss dot fabric, very old sort of vintage fabric. This is ledger from the Department of Education in Australia. In the 40s, 50s and 60s, everything had to be written on blue. No idea why, but it's the perfect blue for this journal, so I have used that ledger throughout. Here is it's the page from the printable kit, but I've shrunk it down and printed it onto cardstock. Then I've cut out the image of the two girls, and I have put another piece of ephemera from the kit inside as a frame and backed that with tea stained paper, and then hand stitched around the edge to make a really sweet journaling card there. So that's an idea of how to use the kit. I've used a Tim Holtz stamp under here, a glass milk button, and a piece of Boudoir lace there as a tab. This is a vintage or antique embroidery magazine page. I've made a little tuck spot there with a twine bow, because this is the middle signature, middle page of the first signature, and I didn't want it to be too square. I guess I wanted it to be a little bit interesting, and I've done some collaging at the bottom there, and there is a lace tuck spot at the top there. Sometimes I just can't express what I need to say, but I think you get the idea. Okay, so this is more of that French letter from 1912, and beautiful handmade paper tag with a torn fabric image and 3 little crosses that I've stitched on. I stitched them on at the end. I'm sort of trying really hard to do any stitching before I stick it on the tag, so you don't really have that in the way of journaling, but sometimes I don't forget. Sometimes I just add things after the fact. So, but that's a really sweet tag tucked in there. Some velvet ruffle and a little daisy trim. It is actually a long length of trim, but I just cut the individual daisies off, and you can see here they're still joined together. This is a piece of ephemera, one of the postcards from the Boudoir Kit. I've put an element up the top here with a tab and just glued that with permanent glue. I've roughed up the edge with a metal ruler and just, I think you've seen me sort of soften the edge, so that, you know, antique and vintage postcards are never, they have softened over time. So that's sort of what I'm trying to achieve. And I've just put a little piece of that fabric and some more daisies on the bottom there. But that is just printed onto light cardstock and clipped on with one of those Tim Holtz clips there. I've put this down the bottom here because I did tear the edge of the ledger off and the number came off, and you don't throw this out. In this journaling community, you don't throw ledger numbers out, page numbers. So I've just cross-stitched that on with one of the little forget-me-not blossoms that my friend Haley paints onto book pages, but I will link her shop in the description. Beautiful piece of lace trim here, and belly bands and I have an interesting relationship. I love them, but I'm never sure what to put in them because everything kind of moves around. But I've decided from this point forward I will be decorating them with a bow at the top. I just love this look here with the bow, and this is how I came about making these large journaling cards, because they sit in the belly band really beautifully. So there's just some collage pieces on there, all original, and it just slips in, and you can sort of see some of the detail through the lace, but it kind of stays in the belly band because I just like things to stay where I put them. I'm not bossy most of the time. Anyway, so this is another page of the printable kit. On each of the pages I have hand torn around the edge and just done a little bit of gilding to take away that white, because I didn't really want any white in this journal. I typically pair blue and white together because it creates that sort of fresh, crispy look, but this is a more muted sort of look, so I have done a little bit of gilding on the edge. A daisy stamp and some chantilly as a pocket there, with some crochet and a glass milk button stitched on the edge. So this bow is meant to sit beautifully down like this, and I have really tried hard to make it do this, but it keeps flipping up. So that's how it will just sit, unless I actually glue it, which I might do, because anyway, it's still a bow and it's still pretty. But I've stitched on some wallpaper, and this is a little tuck spot here, so you can put a little photo or a little quote on that side, and you can also do the same on that as well, or a folded piece of paper with some journaling on it. Some more of the printable, that beautiful heart-shaped Victorian scrap. On this page, I've just folded this down. I didn't tear off the number again. I've just folded that down to create a little bit of interest and to soften the sort of page edge. Here I have a fabric tuck spot, and I've also added, for something a bit interesting, a little tuck spot down the, or pocket down the bottom there. And this is a vintage hanky that I've stitched onto some tea-stained paper. So I've just sort of tucked that in there. Of course, all the ephemera can be moved around the journal. I just sort of choose where I think it fits. So blue lace ruffle there on the tea-stained. This is some really lovely braille paper, vintage braille paper, the perfect shade for this journal. Some cotton lace stitched on as a pocket. It's a nice deep pocket. And at the top here, I have found these amazing pins. It's quite flexible though, the metal part of the pin. I have a feeling it would have been used in the floristry industry, but it's quite old and rusted with the pearl on the end. And I've just pinned some tea-stained sari trim to the top there. I do have a few of those, so they'll probably pop up in each of my journals going into the future, because I'm trying really hard to use all of my pretty things. So this is a ledger from France, I think 1910 or 1920, and I have stenciled a daisy onto the tea-stained paper there. And I'm still doing layering, but it's not as obvious as most of my other journals. This is the center of the second signature. I chose this vintage bird postcard because I just loved the colors, and there were little daisies, I think, in the picture. So I've added a snippet there from the front cover. Actually, I had to cut out a piece to sort of join it, and a ruffle at the bottom. I don't have any scraps left after a journal. I now challenge myself to use every single part in the journal, and that's what inspires creativity as well, that challenge. On the back, I've used some French folded envelope just to cover up the writing, because this is only a vintage postcard from 1957. I think you can still see the stamp, and I just love that blue French stamp at the top there, so you can definitely journal on the back of that. And the other side of that French ledger, I've used some beautiful handmade paper from my friend Heather, and I will link her shop in the description. I've torn a piece of the paper diagonally, so there's a corner tuck spot, and there's another one further along in the journal. And I've just put some of Hayley's beautiful hand-painted blossoms and one of the daisy trims on there. So that's a nice spot to tuck something. As I said, I've used the scrap of the ledger that I tore off at the top there. And I have used some really delicate antique lace and just hand stitched 3 blossoms on there rather than 3 more cross stitches, because, you know, same gets a bit boring. So something a little bit different at the top there. And with this, I have turned it into a pocket, but I have just sewn it on in 3 parts, so you can still use that page to journal on without too much interference. And the beauty of that little pocket being stitched on in those 3 parts is you can actually put something in there and see it come out sort of the sides at the bottom, which I think's an interesting feature. So yes, that is a little pocket there, but you can actually snip that off if you want to. So there's some versatility, I would like to think, in my journals as to how you move into it and use it. Because I know when I get a journal, I change it up quite a bit to suit myself, and that's, I guess, the idea. Very delicate lace pocket here with a Suffolk puff or yo-yo stitched on, and at the top here I used a Tim Holtz stamp and stamped onto sari silk just experimentally, and it didn't actually bleed into the sari silk, which I was quite impressed with. And I've just used a tiny mother of pearl button as to create a tab there at the top. And that's the other page of the printable kit. Here is a lace pocket with some crochet tablecloth, I think it was tablecloth, and a journaling tag. So what I did, one of the pages of the kit, I shrank down to A5 size, so they come in an A4 sized image. Shrank it down, cut it in half, so I printed it onto white cardstock, cut it in half, cut the corners off and inked it, and you can actually use it as a collaged tag. Of course, I've layered on things like fabric with a little piece of crochet at the top there, some trim, and an image that I cut out from a Will's cigarette card. So I have layered on it, but it actually looked quite sweet just with the fabric tab at the top. So that's another idea of how to use my kits, some of the pages in my kits, to make extra ephemera. Because with only 5 pages, they are kind of mini kits, I guess. There's another stamp of that daisy in blue, and down the bottom here I did a ruffle with some of that trim and some cross stitching there, so a little cluster. on some of that Locta paper. You can write on this, just not with fountain pen. So you can use ballpoint pen, but not an ink-based pen. Another page of the printable kit with a hand-stitched on ruffle. And this might be my favourite page in the whole journal. I've used some gorgeous tulle lace on a ledger, and I've created a big journaling card and hand stitched the word love. I realized after I did this, I had done a similar thing in a previous journal, and I realized I could probably choose another word like daisy, for example. But love just appeared, and so I've sort of glued that on to this collaged tag with a image of a lady in a car and one of Hayley's little blossoms there. So it's a nice large journaling card. But what I love is that what I love is that you can actually see the journaling card through the lace. So it's the ultimate layer. It's the layer with a layered tag on top of the layer. And I took the lace around to the other side rather than creating another snippet, because that adds interest onto the other side of that page as well. On this page, I have a couple of layers here at the top with a mother of pearl button. And this is a French envelope from 1912, that beautiful French blue, and it is a quite a large pocket. It goes all the way down, obviously, but you can use it as a double pocket, so you've got the inside of the envelope and behind it as well. So I haven't actually glued the envelope to the page, just machine stitched it and used a little bit of lace at the bottom there. This is the other half of that beautiful handmade paper, and I fussy cut some of that trim and stuck that on. This is another image from the Boudoir Kit, and I hand stitched around it to create a frame. I stuck it onto some of that French letter, and then I've backed it with some tea-stained paper. And I've run my metal ruler along the edge just to soften that and softened the corners. So that's something that you could machine stitch, of course, if you're not into hand stitching. I had to do a lot of hand stitching because I had an unwell child this week, so I did not want to risk my sewing machine at night while he's sleeping above. Some beautiful antique music paper is just the perfect shade, that real dark shade and soft paper. Some experimental stamping, but hopefully I have redeemed it with a little collage at the bottom with some of that trim. Again, this is the center signature page, and to soften the squareness or rectangular shape, I have just torn and folded the edge here, but I wanted also to see the bow at the top, and also so this page would sit more flat, I guess. So that sort of actually adds, that looks like one page as well. So that's all, you know, the thought process behind it. So again, this is a belly band with the bow at the top. I left this quite long because I just love the length in this sort of seam binding. And I have actually used a journaling card from a kit that will be available in my, it is available in my Etsy shop. It is my antique French fashion page kit, and this is the teal and brown fashion book plate from Le Mode Illustré, and I have stuck an element on the corner there and some old book paper on the back and machine stitched around it. So this there's there's 4 A4 sized images in the kit, and then I've also created a page where all 4 images are on the one page, which you will obviously see if you have a look at the kit. But in future I would love to use these as the center pages, the A4 sized one. So I shrunk this down to fit 2 to a page, and that's how I got this size. There is a line across each of the images because it had been folded and I couldn't iron it out, so that is that needs to be part of the feature. But if you were to have this as a journal center page, which is the intention of the kit, the fold is going to be part of the fold in the page anyway. So yes, that's a nice big journaling card for this belly band, and it just sort of peekaboos out the sides with that element there as well. And that beautiful music paper, a lace pocket. This is actually stretchy lace, but it's cotton. I just love that. And this is the other side of that page I was talking about that I shrank down from the Boudoir Kit and printed onto cardstock. So I've done a velvet ruffle and added a little bit of trim at the top there, and hand stitched one of the shrunk ephemera pieces and layered that onto some coffee stained linen. And I have just inked the edge and run my metal ruler. But this actually looked really beautiful as a card on its own because the doily is at the top there. So you could actually just put a tab and have the card as is without adding anything to it. At the top here, I have some tea-stained sari trim and another glass milk button. And a velvet ruffle here, very decadent, with some 3 freshwater pearl beads. The holes in these were too small for me to do journal jewelry, which is the charms I usually make to hang off the side, and I was at a loss as to how to use them, but I can actually sew them, hand stitch them on. So I put some on to the, this was a snippet from the doily at the front cover, so I've just layered that on there. And the other side of that French ledger and the printable, and I just love that envelope. And some really gorgeous old bobbin trim there with a beautiful aged patina to it, and a little bit of stamping at the bottom of the lock to paper there. And this is the pocket from the front, just runs all the way through, and in this one is also a collaged journaling card, and I have added a bow at the top with some eyelets as a feature. So that is in the back pocket there. So that is Marguerite. So her the back, the spine and the front, and there is the gorgeous woman herself, Daisy in French. And I won't retie the closure because that could end up being quite messy, and I'm pleased that I've gotten to the end of this video reasonably unscathed. So that I will sort of leave there because that is I'm quite happy with that little closure. And yes, thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.